So in this tutorial, we're going to do a quick overview of basic storyboard setup. Storyboards are really useful and they're really great for explaining the problems that you find in your research to illustrate where the issues and errors are with products and services and systems, and they're also really good to explain how your product works and functions right at the end, so you can explain the steps that the user goes through when engaging with your product. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look very quickly at how we set a storyboard up, and it's pretty straightforward. The first thing you got to do is get images that you want to use. So if you have a look on the screen here, we've got a number of images which I did when I was a student in my final year. This is the first project, first semester, and I was trying to explain the steps of my friend throughout a busy day. So each photograph that you take of your storyboard is like a mini hero shot that's got to capture the essence of what's happening at that point in the process. This image here, for example, I was trying to explain my friend was busy at work. At this one, he was coming home for his tea. This one here, he was cooking breakfast in the morning. Now, technically, every single thing you have in the photograph should be there on purpose. You should take out things that are meaningless. All this here was sort of put in on purpose to sort of illustrate the point that he's cooking breakfast. I don't know why he's using this. It's a rather large pan to be using this time in the morning. But either way, everything should be set up as best as you can to try and make it look good. Now, I'm not saying this is a good example of a good image. This is just where I was at the age I was. As you can see here, I'm trying to compose each of these pictures. Like this one here, he's dead center. All the lines of the street and the houses are bringing you back to him in the middle. So it's really sort of focusing your eye in to the point of him walking down the street. So you want to take a number of images, quite a few of each, find the ones which work well and bring it down to a nice number. And then you're going to bring these images in to a board in Photoshop. Now, what we can do is once you have your images, you can select them all, the 8 that you want, and then you can open them with Photoshop. And it should be fairly quick as long as the images aren't too large. And here they all are in Photoshop now. And what I can do is, if each of the images, say this one here is a little bit greyed out, I think the colours and tones need a bit of working, you can go to each image and you go to levels in adjustments, and you can sort of darken down the blacks and you can increase the whites slightly. If you just want to improve the contrast of the image, you can overexpose things or underexpose things. It's just nice sometimes to balance these things out. So if you come to images like, if we have a look at this one here, he's kind of on the chair, levels can be quite good just to pick up the brightness a little bit more and just bring down the blacks. So you've got the preview here of sort of before and after. It's a lot better. So you can use that just to correct your images slightly. I'm not going to get into all of that today. But once you've got all your images in Photoshop, you want to make a new page, and you want it to be A3 at 300 pixels per inch, and you choose 300 because it's a large pixel size. It gives you lots of space to work on. Your images should be landscape, like this. So all your pages should be long. And what you want to have is you want to have all of your rulers set up. Now you can do that in View and Show Rulers. You see, you can bring your rulers on, and if the increments of size aren't what you want, you can go to Preferences in here, Units and Rulers, and change it to centimeters like I've done here. That's how you can set that up. Now, the next thing you want to do is use the pointer tool up here, and you want to bring in some guides onto your page. It's always good to have a bit of white space around the edge of your page. I've seen a lot of projects recently where students are doing design work with everything really close to the edge. Never be afraid of using white space on your pages. It gives everything space to breathe and makes it look much nicer. So I always put like a bit of a border around the edge like that, and then I will stick one right in the center because we're going to put 4 images along the top and 4 images along the bottom. So if you have a think, this is about 28 long, so about 14 is bang in the center. So we'll do that. So these are my 2 halves. It's probably a little bit high. Probably adjust that a little bit. Now, the next thing you want to do is think about how you put your images on the page. Now, yes, you could, if you wanted to, just drag your images onto the page, and using Edit and Free Transform or Control and T, you can then order these how you want. So you could have this one here, and then you could have another one here, another one here, and you could do it that way if you wanted to. It's pretty naff, pretty basic, but yeah, that's the quick way of doing it. That's the naff way of doing it. If you want. And by the way, if you want to resize things, if I did Control and T here, you see how it brings these boxes up. all these shortcuts are hidden. So free transform changes the size of things, but if you do Control and T, you can resize it. The same as if you cut is Control and X, save would be Control and S. Try and get used to doing the shortcuts. They're all listed for you in Photoshop. It makes your life a lot easier. So anyway, we're going to ditch this. If I wanted to copy that over, I could press down Alt, and that will copy this over. You see? These are little things we'll be doing in a bit. But no, we're not going to use that. What we're going to try and do is make something nice with boxes around the edges to kind of frame each of the image slightly. So down here you have something called paths. Now if you click in paths, you can get path shapes. If you hold down your mouse, you can choose different ones. So I'm going to choose a rounded rectangle tool. Now if I draw a shape with that, that will give me a rounded edged box. If I turn the background off, you can see it's just a line. Now this is controlled by these settings up here. The minute it says 5 point, I can change that and make that slightly bigger if I wanted to. I can change the color in the middle by choosing a color there, and I can change the stroke around the outside. That's the line. And these are adjustable all the way through. You can change these as much as you want. You can't necessarily edit it or paint on it, because you see how that has a little cross through, and I can't cut something out of it if I wanted to cut a bit out of it, because technically it's a path, it's a shape. So what you want to do is you would want to change that into a normal layer, which we'll do in a bit. Ideally, this is how you change the settings for these. You can change the size here. So this is, say, it's 1048. I could say 2000 if I wanted, and make it bigger. The corner radius here is set up each time you do it. So the corner radius at the minute is 100. If I changed that and made that, say, 50, and then drew another one, you'd get much tighter box edges. If I change that and say put 400 in and drew another one, it's exactly the same for some reason, no idea why. Probably because I put 40, not 400. So we put 400 in there, and then draw another one. You'll probably get something with much, much bigger rounded edges. So you control the box edge size here, the radius, and you control the line thickness here, the stroke color and the fill color of that shape. And you can come back in and edit that any time. You can change it to dotted lines or whatever you want, and you can mess around with that in more settings, and how far apart they're spaced. You know, do you do 6, or do you do, say, 9, and it will change it. The gap can be 1. You can change this all around in there. These are all little settings you can mess about with at some point if you feel that you want to. So what I want to do is I want to find a box size that fits on here. So I'm going to drag a box on here. That's too big. So I'm going to go back and change the corner radius to about 100. Let's see what that's like. Okay, that's quite nice. And I'm going to use this to put my images into. Now, the way to see how many would fit on the page is I can now grab that. If I have auto select on, I should be able to grab the edge of this. If I hold down Alt, if I turn the background off, hold down Alt, you can copy things over. And you see how those lock together? That's called a snap. And snap can be found in here. If you turn snap off, things don't move around. If you turn snap on, things will lock together. That can be a help and it can be a hindrance depending on what you're trying to do. You just need to measure it. So if I look at these shapes of these boxes here, you can have a look at those. It's kind of fairly nicely spaced to a degree. If I hold down Shift, I can select all of them, and I can move them about a little bit. And I can just move that one across, and that one across, that one across. And the spacing looks good. What you want to have is a nice spacing down the left, a nice spacing down the right, evenly spaced between them. A space at the top, which is okay, and a space at the bottom because you're going to put your text in here. So now I could select all of those by holding Shift and selecting them all, and if I hold down Alt again and press Shift, you can drag. Actually, let's do that again. You should be able to move all 4 of them like that, copy it over. So now you can start to see your storyboard coming together in terms of shapes. Right, so I think that size is nice. So we're going to get rid of these. And we're going to use this to cut those other images. And to do so, we need to have a new page, which will be A3 again, 300 dots per inch. Rotate the canvas 90 degrees and make it slightly bigger so we can work on it. And what we're going to do is drag this shape and bring this into this image here. And we're going to cut the images to fit within that. So if we go and take this first image here of my friend making his breakfast and drag that and drop that onto this page, this is currently layer 1. The image is layer 1 and it's sitting above the rounded rectangle tool. So we want to grab that and drag that to the top. This is like layers of a cake. Right? So the layers at the top of the cake sit on top of other images. In the same way, if I drag this image in, like this would sit on top of these two. But if I drag that to the bottom, it now sits behind those two. So you need to learn how to use layers. So with this now, I'm going to think about how much of that I want within that box. So if I do Control and T again, if you hold down Shift, it stops if I try to change the size of that, it does this, right? You don't want to do that. What you want to do is Control and T and hold down Shift, and that will constrain it. You can also lock it as well by clicking the padlock business here. If you click the padlock there, that will just lock it. And we're going to put this within the box where it kind of looks good. So at the minute, the page is probably a little bit too small to see what's going on. There we go. And if I hold down spacebar, you get the hand, which means I can move the page around. So I think that kind of looks nice. I've captured enough of my friend. I've got rid of the bin that looked dreadful out the back, and I've cut out some of this rubbish here, and I'm just sort of trying to capture him making his breakfast. So I hit enter. Now what you want to do is you want to use this shape as a cutting tool, like a tool that would cut something in the workshop. You want to use that as a way of cutting out this image. So what we do is we go back to the rounded rectangle tool, and like I said before, you can't edit it at the moment because it's still a path. It's still editable. If I was to click on that, I could change all these settings here. But what I want to do is turn that into a layer. So if I right click on the rounded rectangle and go rasterize, what you do is you then turn that into just a basic shape, and you can tell that by the paint brush icon here. Before it was like a square with dots. That means path. It's editable and manipulating. If you right click and turn to rasterize, that turns to a paintbrush. And what that indicates is it means that you can work on it, and then you can change it however you want, really. So now we come here. This is the Magic Wand tool. This is one of the cutout tools that we can use. The selection tolerance is how accurate it is. If you have a 1, it's very weak. If you have a 100, it's very strong. And what we do is I can click inside this rectangle tool, and it will select all those pixels on the inside of that line. It's not on the image, it's just on the line. If I click on the outside of it, it will select all of the pixels on the outside of the line. I can get rid of those selections by going deselect or Control and D if I want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the image on, the photograph. This area is selected, so whatever's outside this line is going to be cut. If I now click on the image layer, what I'm telling Photoshop is that now I want that selection to cut from that layer. So now if I go to edit and cut, it will use that selection to cut away everything from this layer. If I turn off the rectangle tool and turn off the background, what we've now got is the image that is now cut to that radius from this shape, right? So now I can get this image and I can drag this back into this board, and I can drop that. If you look at the snap, it will snap that on like this, okay? It will snap it to that image. Then I would want to put the layers in the right order and put the line on top, and then we have a nice boxed image of my friend with rounded corners with black edges, and that looks a lot better than if we just got this image here and dropped it in and chucked that on like a square. You can see the difference. One's a little bit more cartoony, but it's also more considered in terms of the composition, right? So we get rid of that. Now, ideally what you do is you would drag each of these images back into this page like we've done before, and then you would resize each of them. So again, I would do Control and T, hold down Shift, and I would bring this down to a point where I feel it fills the image just nicely, about there. I'd hit enter. I'd go back to the rounded tool, I'd hit the Magic Wand, I'd select the outside of the shape, and then I'd go back to the picture layer, and I'd go edit and cut, and again, that's now cut that out, and I would drag that back into here and drop it in. And I would continue to do that through my storyboard. But it would take far too long to do that on screen, so we're going to use one that I've set up before, which I think would be best because it would be a little bit quicker. So we close all that down. If we come back down to this one here, these are two which I set up earlier. One is cutouts, and this one here is storyboard. So I set these two pages up before to save me a bit of time. As you can see, I've used this line and I've cut them all out. Now what I can now do is if I turn the shape off, these are all these images I did yesterday. This board has been set up, it's got all the lines there that we set up on the last page. So if I touch the top layer, hold down Shift, right, I can now drag all of these and bring that onto here. Now, if you've noticed, I've got rid of this black box on here that I've used. I could now actually, if I wanted to, bring this, back into this as well, if it was missing from this page, and use this to drop along on top of the other boxes. But there's another way of achieving the same result, which I'm going to show you now. So the first thing is if you have auto select on, you should be able to just touch a layer and move it around. So I'm going to put this layer here, and I'm just going to jiggle these around. Because it's got auto select on and it's got snap on, this should all just start to jiggle itself around on the page nicely and line up fairly well, like a magnet almost. Now these images are actually a little bit bigger than the ones I had before, but that's okay. So I'm going to drop this one here. You don't want to have your boards too cluttered, because if you have them too cluttered, they tend to look messy, and you don't want that. So I'd say that's probably about right. That's not too bad on there. If you're not sure, you can just drag down another guide and drop one on, and then I can use that to line everything up if I wanted. Like this one's a bit low, so now that should snap to that line. Look here. So your composition is really important. Getting everything lined up is really important. And if you're really not sure, then you can just keep dropping on guides until you get everything exactly how you want. Yeah, so that's the way of doing it. Now, at the minute it's a little bit cluttered. I think what I might do is change the size of all of them. So I select all of them and do Edit, Free Transform, which is here. And if I hold down Shift, I should just be able to manipulate the size of them collectively. Hit Enter. Right, so that's adjusted them all. And now what I'll do is I'll grab these two and we'll just line this one up to here, maybe to about there. Move this one along again. That one's good. That one's quite good. These two here, if I hold down Shift and touch the layers, I can select a couple of them at the same time. This one and this one. Move that across. Yeah, that'll do. So the second way of doing this with the lines around the outside is, if I move this guide back up again to the bottom, we can border this by clicking on the layer. So if I find the layer 1, which was this one, if I zoom in on it a little bit and move that down, if I double click on the layer, you get these layer style options coming up, and there's all kinds of stuff in here. You can put like bevels and embosses on, you can put drop shadows on, but don't do that because it looks tacky. You can put strokes on, which are quite nice, and this is effectively the same thing what we had before. You can change the thickness of the stroke here, so I could put like a 9, or I could put like let's put a 12, that's quite good, maybe even 15, let's see. And then you can change whether it's on the outside of the image or the inside of the image. So if I put inside the image, it will just cut it down a little bit, but it will tighten up on the page. So yeah, and you can change the colour in here as well. You can have a blue, or whatever you want, or black, or white, depending on what you're doing. It doesn't really matter too much in a minute. And these are changeable. If you come back out of that, you can see them down here. You can hide them, but if you open them up, you can actually go into each one. So I can double click on that and bring it back, and then change this, say, back down to 12 if I wasn't happy. Now the benefit of doing this is that once you've got them all up on the page like this together, you can copy these layer styles over. So if I just change that because I'm picky, yeah, you can copy all these layer styles over for each of the images. Let's make that 18. If it's actually making any difference, is it? Let's have a look. Yeah, it is, yeah. Strange. So make it 25. That'll do. You can copy them all over. If I go to this layer here and I right click on that, and you can see this bit here that says clear layer style or copy layer style. So clearing it would wipe it out. If I do copy and then click on each layer, I can paste it, or I can hold down Shift and click all of them, and then I can right click again and I can go to paste layer style, and it will just chuck a line around each of them, so it's done all of them at the same time. And I can just collapse those so it saves a bit of space. Now you're probably better off at this point saving the work, so file save, because otherwise Photoshop will eat memory and it will crash, and if it crashes it won't be good. Let's have a look on here. So if I make this one, I can change them again. So if I bring it down to 18, and I can copy that layer style. If I wasn't happy with the rest of it, select Shift and then paste layer style and change all of them, right? So that's better. Now, in terms of the next bit, once you've got your images on, some storyboards look good with just pictures. Some of them look good with text. Now, what I've done here is I've put a few texts in. You don't have to have them. It sometimes looks nice. But here I've just put a few in. Now, the way that you do that is use the text tool, and you choose text and you drag like this, and the icons here, and you choose the size here, and you choose the type here, and how you want the font to look. So I could put here makes, probably capitals is better. So I put makes breakfast at 7 o'clock AM. So I'm trying to sort of explain a busy day, and the same thing again. If you've got snap on, all of these things should start just to snap together, snap to the same line. Let's have a look here. What works 10 hours straight? So that goes in there. Takes a 1 hour journey. Okay, that's not too bad. Makes it to town by foot. So you can line these up. So using guides is really, really good. Just make sure everything looks nice and tidy. So bring that down a little bit. Maybe move this text up. Like that. That's good. And the other thing that you can do then is you might want to put on numbers. Now, I thought about putting numbers on before. It's exactly the same way of doing it as you would have done with the text. And you can just put your numbers at the top of each image. But another way of doing it, which can look quite nice, is if you put like a circle in there or another square in there. So if I was to get this square again and we draw another one, that's too big. So we change the corner radius down to maybe about 40. Like that. That looks quite nice. And we'll make the line much thinner. Make it down to maybe 3. Okay. And we'll also change the inside to white, like that. If I move that, that should sit nicely just on top of the corner of this image, right, which can look quite good. So I could just stick that on the corner there. I could drop a guide down so I know where the top is. And if I hold down Alt, I can copy that over. I'll keep holding down Alt, look, and it will just lock over each image, lining up with that. Then I could take the number. If you can't see the number, it's because it's down here. You need to move the numbers to the top. So if we take all these numbers here, which are these, number 2, that should work out all right now. And then you can use the arrow keys to line them all up. Number 4, like that. And if you hold down Shift, and when you're selecting objects, you can actually copy over multiples of them. So if I hold down Alt now, I can pull these down to here. And then we go back to 5. 5 can sit in there. 6, 7, and finally 8. Right, so we collapse the layers and we'll just sit back and have a look. What we can now do is take the guides away. So we go to show guides, we can hide the guides and have a look at the board. So it's kind of coming together, it's starting to look alright, but what it needs is something just to lift it off the page. But first of all, what you probably want to do is, if you're having a product, you want to have a brand name or tag or a logo or something like that. And I just grabbed these off the internet because I thought these were quite good. So we'll open this with Photoshop. Right, I thought that was quite nice. And we'll open, let's have a look. We'll open this with Photoshop as well, because that's quite nice. Yeah, these, because it's all about relaxation. So let's just say this storyboard was for a product called Just Chill, right? So we'll grab Just Chill and we'll stick that into here. So we'll put this down in the bottom corner, like that. Now it looks like all of this is actually, if I select all of these, what I should have done in here is select everything barring this, so to move all them over a little bit, so they're nicely balanced. And then we'll take this and we'll make this a little bit bigger. Like that. And we'll probably move these up a little bit. Like that, to give that a bit more space down here. So that's not maybe in the bottom left corner, not sure. Either way, we'll move that there. And then what we could do is we could bring some fruits in or something to kind of make it look a bit more funky. Maybe stretch that a little bit like that. Turn that around. So you're nearly done. I'd say it's kind of okay. I'm not quite sure if I like this in the corner here. It's a little bit overpowering, but sometimes a little bit of a logo in the corner can look quite nice, especially if it's got a whiteboard. You probably want something in the background just to bring this out off the page, and that's easy to do, but you want to set it up as a new layer. So if we go to new layer here, you can use the marquee tool, and we could maybe just select a block, and we can just fill it in with a color. So if you go to the paint bucket tool, which is here, I can select a color. So what I'd probably want to do is select maybe one of the colors from the product. So if we've got like this color here, so we'll choose that one. This lighter color is quite nice, and I can fill this layer 11 with it. So I can click on there, that's the first one. And if I drag this right down to the bottom, it will stick it behind everything else. Control and D is deselect. So we can move this around a little bit. It just helps to push things off the page slightly. I could then maybe get another one if I wanted, and I could draw another one in here. And now I could pick a new layer. So do a new layer there. And I could maybe pick the second color on here. This one. No idea what this is going to look like, or even if it's going to look any good at all, which it might not. It might look completely naff. And we'll just repeat the process. We'll just take this colour here, which is a bit darker, and we'll fill that in. And what we'll do, we'll move that up a little bit behind here. These three colours. Maybe bring this one down. Yeah, I'm not sure if I like that really. You can always knock the opacity out a little bit. You can fade these out. So I could select that layer and knock the opacity down to this one too, just to fade them. Maybe this one's a bit too strong, so you can bring that out a little bit like that. Because otherwise what you end up with is too much for contrast. You want something where the background images are kind of nicely balanced, where they're not overpowering the rest of it. You can change the size of this a little bit and see if that helps. Sometimes less is more. Maybe just a little bit of a line behind like that is kind of better. So maybe what we do is we bring these two down a little bit. And that is just about it, really. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm going to put too much more time into that. So that's a really, really basic storyboard. You can have it with or without numbers. Yeah, that's how you can do it. Maybe a little bit on the bottom there just to tie the whole thing off. And then we're done. So you save that. And then, of course, when your image is finished, you would save it as a JPEG. So you go to File, Save As. And if I put desktop on here for now, put JPEG. And that's all good. So I'll save that to the desktop. And if we come down here, it should have been saved here, although I'm having problems with my computer at the minute. It doesn't seem to have saved it at all. I have no idea where these are all going. It's in here. So this is the final image that we've got here. This is the board. So now I can go and print that on A3, which should look quite nice. But that was quick, it's basic. If you have a look at other ones I've done over the years, when I used the one with my friend, this is what that ended up looking like in the end. I've done a lot more cartooning here to trace him. There's a bit of text here about what he does in his day, and I've done it as like a block of stories. If you come over here, this was another one I did of him later on. So I've just used 8 images but without text, and I've line traced him in the corner down here, and I've put the logo down here for the product that I made in the final year, and I've kind of faded out this background here, and I've line traced him here, but we'll get into that at another point of how to do it. But you could lay it out like this, it's quite nice. Another one would be to do storyboards where you literally cut the person out completely without any background image, and you just use that person to tell that story without text, using lots of white space. This is another way of doing it. And the one here is quite good. This is the first one I ever did. This is again just like how to make a cup of tea basically, but each of these little squares, instead of like a step, what I've done is I've just put a detail of what's going on in the image. So there we go, that's all good. I hope that has been interesting to some degree, and good luck with that. And if you've got any questions, of course, just let me know. Cheers.